A person who eats only plants cannot get cholesterol, therefore will not be able to adequately make, especially women, the hormones they need for their cycle, for adolescence, and to address stress. We evolved to eat this food. We evolved to eat meat, flesh and fat. It's our world that makes us iodine deficient. The vitamin D is in the fat you eat. The vitamin K is in the fat you eat. Everything is in the nutrient-rich meat. Look on Google and you'll see what were the areas of goiter belts. But the goiter belt is now so pervasive, not because the soil has changed, but because we have fluoride everywhere. We have bromide in our, my chair cushion probably has bromide in it. PFAs are inescapable. So you can survive in this world if you take the iodine. It's your shield against these goitrogens. If you're ill, if you have inflammation, if you have any kind of imbalance in your body that would cause inflammation, you're going to need to balance the blood sugar, and that will require little bits of fat at the times when people crash. There's no gray. I'm against fasting because you're putting yourself in a stress state.
For somebody looking to optimize their hormone health, what's the first step?
So make sure, hormone health, what kind of hormones are we talking about? Protein peptides or steroid hormones? So they're either made out of protein peptides or they're made out of cholesterol. So all the cholesterol hormones are going to be optimized by eating fat, obviously.
Okay. So talk more about that. Let's get into some nuances within the diet realm.
Okay, well, humans evolved to eat a high-fat carnivore diet. Our livers do make a small amount of cholesterol, but not enough to make our entire brain and make all those hormones and cover our nerves with myelin sheaths. And so cholesterol has a lot of jobs in the body. And cholesterol only comes from animal fat. So it doesn't come from avocado oil. It doesn't come from peanut oil. It doesn't come from anything else. Our body can only use animal fat, which is cholesterol. And those hormones are made out of cholesterol. So the steroid hormone cascade, which starts as cholesterol, then becomes pregnenolone, then becomes, on the left side, you have on the cascade, you have the immune system and the stress response. And on the right side, you have the so-called sex steroids, which would androstenedione, testosterone, estrogen, things like that.
Okay. You quickly mentioned the fact that our body can make cholesterol, at least to a point.
Right.
Talk about the difference there. If somebody's relying on that, say they're on a plant-based diet, taking in no dietary cholesterol. We'll start on that extreme and then we'll work out.
Well, they will not be able to make enough hormones. And then we live in a world, humans did not evolve to do ultra marathons or have, experienced chronic stress, war, famine. That is not something humans evolved to do. We evolved to run after an animal. We figured out how to make spears, so we didn't have to run too far. So chronic stress is going to eat up a lot of your hormones, a lot of your cholesterol for energy, and a lot of your the cortisol, which is what the hormone that stress has to produce. Not eating it, eating flax seeds, for instance, that's the whole other stuff that those things do. If they're estrogenic, they can also prevent iodine absorption, which the thyroid needs desperately. A plant-based person who eats only plants cannot get cholesterol, therefore will not be able to adequately make, especially women, the hormones they need for their cycle, for adolescence, and to address stress.
Let's get into more of the specifics of the diet you eat and recommend.
Okay. I've been high-fat carnivore for 9 years. I am 61, going on 62 in a couple of months. I started high-fat carnivore at 52 when I went into menopause. I just took out the little bit of plants that I had in my diet. I wake up in the morning, I drink decaffeinated coffee because I don't want any stimulants. I whip it with a bunch of butter. I go paddleboarding for 6 to 7K. I come back, work, have lunch, piece of steak. I snack on butter. I snack on beef jerky. I snack on pieces of fat. Dinner, piece of steak. And that's very simple for me. My husband likes a little bit of chicken, likes eggs, loves eggs, but that's pretty much what I eat. And I feel good that way. That doesn't mean every woman has to eat as restricted as I do. There are plenty of animals. I live on the sea. I could be eating fish, but I don't really feel as nourished eating fish.
In a general sense, would you say there's a hierarchy of animal foods from best to worst? Like, how would you rank all those?
I would say ruminant would be on top, beef, lamb, bison, goat. Oh, goat takes a long time to cook because they eat grass. Sheep, they eat grass. So whatever eats grass is, as some influencers like to say, they're pre-digesting the plants that we're not eating. They don't have omega-6. So an animal, chickens are supposed to eat worms and bugs, right? So they don't get to eat worms and bugs because it's not profitable for them to be out. They can be out, not in cages, but they're not getting worms and bugs only. So their flesh and the eggs have a higher amount of omega-6, which to me isn't going to be damaging because I don't have any health issues. But to somebody who has, say, Hashimoto's or rheumatoid arthritis or any kind of inflammatory issue that could trigger the cortisol, steroid hormone immune response to have a reaction. And that could be anything. It could be eczema. It could be joint pain. It could be anything the sympathetic nervous system can throw at you.
You're bringing up an important point here, the quality of the animal food.
Yeah.
How much of a priority is that for you?
Well, I mean, I don't like Italian meat. I really like Scottish and Irish beef if I can get it. Can't really get it all the time, so I'm eating lots of Italian beef short ribs now and diaphragm, hanger steak and stuff. But the quality is hugely important. I would never eat salmon that wasn't wild.
No, it's important we get into this because it seems like there's two camps within the animal-based influencer realm. A group that say just eat animals and that's all that matters. And then I would say, just in a general sense, half the people are focused on quality. And obviously you're sharing here, you are, I am. I think it makes a big difference.
It depends what you're trying to fix, though, Jesse. So I have patients who are very ill. There's a degree to what you need to do. I can have a half a shot of bourbon once in a while. It's not gonna affect me. I don't have any. It's a tiny bit. It's not gonna. I wouldn't. When I had adrenal issues from a lot of kung fu fighting, it's something I would never consider because I can't have anything go in my body that would put me in fight or flight. So it depends on what you're trying to fix. Some people need to be very restrictive. Some people, I'll say, if my patient comes to me and everything is fixed and their kids are visiting and they want to go have an ice cream, I don't recommend dairy. But once in a while, you can, if you're healthy, we evolved to eat a little bit of crap if we ran out of meat. So it depends on how healthy we are, that 90% of the time we're eating just this great food. If we are able to get it, a little bit of the time we might eat some crap. It shouldn't hurt us.
But you got to
get there. You have to get there, though.
It depends on, I will add a couple other factors too. You brought up the fact of where you are on your health journey and how healthy you are. Also monetarily, people
absolutely.
are going to have different means and be able to afford different qualities of food. And then also your goals. Some people are going to want to, achieve and maintain optimal health, and other people just want to potentially just stave away disease. So it just depends on where you are on that spectrum of where you want to be with your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I have a son. I have 3 kids, but one of them is a teacher in Athens, and I send him a crock pot so he can get cheaper cuts of meat. He can't be eating ribeye.
Let's talk more about the dairy piece. You mentioned quickly there the fact you're not a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ever consuming dairy at all?
Well, I used to actually. The first edition of Good Fat is Good for Women Menopause had a lot of snacks. Butter on cheese, butter on cheese, butter on cheese. And then a couple of years ago, I read a book called The Devil in Milk by an Australian who was explaining A2 milk versus A1 milk. There is absolutely an issue with dairy because of the caseinomorphin content. 2 tablespoons of A1 cow milk is equal to a shot of heroin in an opiate sense, right? So the inflammation that a caseinomorphin can give your body, 2 tablespoons of milk is equal to a shot of heroin. I mean, he literally writes this. So there are different, the whiter the milk, the fresher the milk, what you have is a lot of, or dairy, kefir, yogurt, whatever, goat cheese, you have a lot of protein. If you have aged cheese, the fermentation process eats the protein and the lactose. The lactose isn't really an issue. It's more the proteins. The proteins are inflammatory. So if you're not well, if you have an autoimmune condition, your immune system is overreactive. It's going to see a protein like gluten or dairy or caseinomorphin. It's going to see that as a pathogen. It will react. How does it react? Again, it could be any way, but it will react to that protein thinking it's a virus. So if you're, as you said, depending upon where you are on your health journey, if you still have pain, you still have arthritis, you still have eczema, you still have psoriasis, I would take out dairy. And in some cases, I'll even say to try to stop butter for a week or so. And I've had a couple of people have a really good result from that. And then they heal, and then they can add in the butter.
If you're enjoying this episode, take a second and let me know by clicking like and subscribe below. Thank you so much, and now back to the show. All right, there's a lot of nuance here I want to make sure we tease out. So butter, obviously, that's on the dairy continuum, but you look at that as a different category than milk and cheese.
Has a tiny bit of protein. So when my family's from the South, I used to love drinking buttermilk. Buttermilk, when you and I used to make butter. So you can take a bunch of heavy cream and whip it like crazy, and the liquid that is separated from the fat is buttermilk. Most of the protein is in that liquid. There's a tiny bit of protein left in the butter. And if we make ghee, we can understand if you put a bunch of sticks of butter in a pan and you heat it up, the lactose and the protein rise to the top and you skim it off. And it's literally like, tiny bit. So it's the dose of the poison, I guess. Most people, that little tiny bit of protein, milk protein, doesn't bother them.
Okay, so again, coming to the hierarchy, ghee would be at the top, less sensitivity issues there.
Right.
And then butter. And then we move into things like cheeses and milk. And there's a lot of nuance there. You mentioned A1 versus A2.
Right.
Fermenting of the cheeses.
Yes.
Animal it came from. Pasteurization. Is it pasteurized? Is it not?
Pasteurized, that the whole raw thing that has no effect on the protein content. The only thing that's an issue with dairy is the protein content.
Okay, so let's get into the lower part of that hierarchy where we stand. So A1, is that always something that should be avoided?
If you have pain, I mean, it should be something that you take out in order to try to heal. I mean, the whole point of the elimination diet is you can take out all this stuff. I've talked to so many people who say, I took out this and this and this. I feel so much better. My back pain went away, but I still have no libido, or, something else. So maybe they have to work on, remove something else, or there's some other imbalance going on.
How do you feel about eggs for yourself and patients you're working with?
I remove everything, and then the egg yolk is the first thing I add. A lot of people react to the egg white, not so much the yolk. And the egg white is just protein. There's no nutritional value to it. It's the egg yolk has all the nutrients.
And what about salt? Somebody that's so focused on hormones, obviously that's going to impact the adrenals.
Well, we need salt. The adrenals live on salt. Sodium ion pumps are every single signal in the body. The Morse code of the body is salt, salt, salt. And if we hear carnivore, if you have removed carbohydrates, boy, you need to make sure you're getting a minimum of 5 grams of salt a day.
Okay, so 5 grams is kind of like the baseline.
Yeah.
How much is quality a factor? And what kind do you recommend? There's all different salts within the health world now. Pink salt and sea salt.
I can only get pink salt. So I live in Italy. I live in the bottom of the boot in Italy. It's a small city. I can't get any of the stuff you guys can get. Redmond salt is great. The point of it is that you don't want it to be bleached. You don't want it to be iodized, because It's crap. The iodine they put in, the iodized salt, the Morton's salt, is horrible, and it's bleached. So it's not an electrolyte anymore. The magnesium chloride, the potassium chloride, those things that are electrolytes have been removed. They have been eliminated. So that is not healthy salt.
All right. This is a good segue into iodine then.
Oh,
We don't
yeah,
want
okay.
salt that's been iodized.
Right.
But iodine is one of the things that you preach is super important to maintain health and well-being. For somebody, because this is one of those controversial supplements and, components within food, which has been decreased a lot in more recent times, let's start out talking about the controversy. Why are people either all in or totally avoiding iodine?
Because of yodophobia, because since Theodore Kocher had a reaction to probably a halide toxicity, he had some potassium iodide in 1890 or 1910, something like that. He was a thyroidologist, a Swiss thyroidologist. So he was having he had a lot of work because the Swiss all had goiters. Because it's in the mountains. So mountainous areas, there's less iodine because all of the iodine has washed down away from the mountainsides. So cutting out a lot of mostly women's goiters. And he basically came out against iodine and the medical world because he won a Nobel Prize for medicine. A few years later, everything he said was it. So you had people at the same time saying, it's horrible that we're not using iodine because they saw that it worked for so many things as a disinfectant, as thyroid needed it, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden he decreed it poison. So then it happened again in the 50s with, Wolf Chaikoff. So bad science.
Okay, well, let's talk about iodine in the food supply.
There isn't any.
Any food significant sources? No, because we have a negative state of iodine. Our world is poisoned with goiterogenic substances. So people in Bolivia, people in my family's from Tennessee. I never lived in Tennessee, but I have an aunt, 2 cousins, more people, all iodine deficient. They all had thyroid issues. Mountains of Tennessee. Okay. So mountainous areas. I've talked to people in Haiti, a lot of iodine. I mean, you can just, it's just, and it affects women. Michigan was a big area of iodine deficiency. That's a goiter belt. So you can look on Google and you'll see what were the areas of goiter belts. But the goiter belt is now so pervasive, not because the soil has changed, but because we have fluoride everywhere. We have bromide in our, my chair cushion probably has bromide in it. PFAs are inescapable. I mean, I have a fancy filter that says it takes some out, but not enough for me to be secure that when my daughter's pregnant, I'm going to let her drink the water without taking a lot of iodine. So you can survive in this world if you take the iodine. It's your shield against these goitrogens. Because there's been so much fear instilled in the population against supplementing with iodine, I'm sure a lot of people tuning in have avoided it. I know for a long period of time I did myself, even being in the health world, because there is so much scare still around that supplement. How does somebody begin? If they're deciding at this point, I'm going to begin to supplement, I haven't been doing it to this point. How much? What type?
Okay, so there's 2 types. It used to be only Jean Dugol's recipe of 15%. He called it 15% because it was 10% potassium iodide and 5% elemental organic crystals of iodine. So then the yodophobic people, I don't know. I mean, J. Crowe's is one of the oldest purveyors of iodine in the U.S. They invented the 2% maybe to make it less scary. I have no idea. The 5% is equal to 15%, the original recipe. Now what's an interesting story, in Europe, I still do, but I used to have to provide my patients with iodine because you couldn't get it anywhere except the UK. The UK, still had supplement companies that were selling 15% Lugal solution. Europe, nowhere. So as soon as COVID hit, I didn't have to make it for them anymore. Every single Amazon in Europe started selling Lugals, iodine, 5%, 2%, 7%, because it's an antiviral. So nobody talks about it. And everybody says iodine is bad, but boom, all the Amazons are selling it because it's a known, scientifically proven antiviral. All right, so how do you start? I would start with, it depends upon, the real issue here is that if you have a goiter and you don't know it, if you have a thyroid nodule and you don't know it, if it hasn't been diagnosed, the iodine will be like a kick in the butt to your thyroid. Your thyroid will all of a sudden, might wait. Some people will have palpitations. That's like a worst case scenario. So 1 drop of iodine could make your thyroid suddenly start trying to work. It's limping and now it's trying to run. So for some people that doesn't feel good. And then you have to do a detox process. Otherwise, everybody should start with 2%, the two drops of the 5%, sorry.
Okay. So 5%, 2 drops.
Which is actually 15%, but you know.
Okay. And if somebody didn't have a negative reaction to that amount, would that be a good maintenance dose?
No, it's a good dose to top you up, but that goes through a whole, you could say if you have swollen prostate, if you have issues, maybe you should try to raise it. It really depends on what's going on. I can't really just give, this for that, this for that. We know that excess iodine comes out in the urine. So somebody who has a fibroid in the breast, I would say they would need more than 2 drops. Somebody who has cysts in their ovaries, I would say they need more drops.
And once they cleared those health complications, they could come down to a more...
Yeah, the 2...
We'll call it a maintenance dose, the 2 drops of the 5%.
The 2 drops is what the Jorge Fletches and Guy Abraham in the 80s figured out with their Hakala lab would bring you, once you were sufficient in iodine in your system, all the cells were saturated, the 2 drops a day would top you up, as the British like to say. That's all you needed to put in to make sure that you had a constant supply, adequate supply.
And you quickly touched on the fact that we can eliminate extra. How efficient is that system?
Oh, very.
Is there
kidneys.
ever people that run into toxicity, or is it if the kidneys are healthy, people will be good?
Yeah.
And what about men versus women? I know at one point there you highlighted for women, it sounded like being more important, but I'll have you elaborate on that. And does dosage differ between the two?
It's more important for women, definitely during adolescence, because women build more sexual characteristics. So women build physically more stuff. They build breasts, they build a uterus, it increases, the ovaries get bigger. All these tissues need iodine. So men obviously need iodine during adolescence too. The testes and the scrotum are growing bigger, but they don't need as much. They will also suffer if they're around goitrogenic substances, but not as much. So yes, women, an adolescent, and in fact, Marine's studies in Akron, Ohio, he was preventing goiters in adolescent girls in the 20s. He didn't even bother with the boys. He didn't check them out because they didn't have a history of getting goiter. But the goiter belt of Akron, Ohio, the girls did.
And when we're talking about supplementing, are we talking about orally? I assume we are, but you also hear about people putting it on the skin and supposedly absorbing it that way, or using that as a test to see how efficient we are in iodine.
Yeah, I use that as a test. Okay.
All those and some nuance there.
All right. If you have a breast cyst, definitely put it on your breast, paint your breast. If you have a skin lesion, a mole, put it on there. You can put it on your skin that way. It's amazing at healing wounds. So Dr. David Derry even put out a paper with showing how the skin healed faster a laceration and a wound healed faster with iodine, and he would put saran wrap on it.
So you're saying you could use it on site of injury. I was asking about using it on the skin
oral.
as a testing method.
Yes,
and then using
method.
it on the skin as a method of getting it into the body versus oral.
No, I would definitely say that you want to have it orally. I personally, my husband and I, my kids take it in a glass of water. We use gelatin caps. A glass of water, a little bit of water. It wouldn't be adequate to absorb it. A lot of it evaporates if you're gonna. I mean, it's good. It's a okay measure to test to see how fast it evaporates and is absorbed, because it's going to evaporate some. So it's not enough. You're not going to saturate your cells by painting yourself with it. It's a decent test to see how much you need, because some people it'll last for 12 hours and some people it'll be gone in a half an hour. That means they sucked it in, right? But for me, it's not adequate as a dosing mechanism to put it on your skin.
And would you have any concern about taking it orally and negative impacts on a healthy gut microbiome?
No, it only does good. All mucus-bearing tissue is really rich in iodine. So mucus-bearing tissue being in the gut, the intestinal, the villi are covered with, the villi are covered with the mucus, your nasal passages, the vaginal canal, everywhere where there's mucus has a ton of iodine.
And what do you see with people if they're an adult who haven't been supplementing and given the deficiency, in the food supply? You mentioned the thyroid, you used terminology, something like turning on. What do you notice with people when they start taking this, if they've gone a lifetime without using it? What are some of the changes you see acutely and then longer term?
Lymph system, the lymph nodes shrink, the lipomas shrink, the cysts shrink, fibroids shrink. There's a lot of need for it. And then, of course, the thyroid, though, if they have gone a lifetime without any iodine and they've been deficient, they're probably going to have a thyroid issue.
Okay.
And I see that a lot.
So we have our animal-based diet. We've now gotten into iodine supplementation, still important even on that diet. Any other supplements, if somebody is eating quote unquote correctly, that you recommend to people?
No, because it's all in the food. We evolved to eat this food. We evolved to eat meat, animal, flesh and fat. It's our world that makes us iodine deficient. So I don't, the vitamin D is in the fat you eat. The vitamin K is in the fat you eat. The B, everything is in the nutrient-rich, dense meat that you're eating, that water-soluble and fat-soluble.
So you've gone over the nuances of what you typically eat. But if somebody decides to eat an animal-based diet, but still includes some plants, some carbohydrates, have you seen healing happen without going to the extreme that you've gone for health issues and then for maintenance? Because what I want to make sure we do is meet people where they're going to go, where they're at.
Right.
Generally, most people are likely not going to be going all the way to a full carnivore diet. So I want to make sure we talk about the nuance in between.
Okay, so get better, and then you can see what you can add in. So my protocol is really 2 weeks, 2 weeks of restriction. And then you can add in all the other animals that are around. And then you can see if you can handle carbs. What are carbs? They're just stimulants. So if you can handle, carbs are, if you go back into glycolysis, so then we have to talk about ketosis, right? Ketosis, I really believe that being in a state of ketosis is the best way to be. My mother had Alzheimer's. I don't want to have it. So I'm eating this way to ensure that I have no neurological issues. If I have an ice cream once every 2 weeks, that's not going to mean I'm going to have Alzheimer's. I'll be in ketosis, 8 hours later. So it's more, you talk about nuances. It's the nuance of how much you're going to eat of this stuff that, I don't eat only, I was just in Glasgow visiting we were babysitting my grandson for a month. We had a scone with butter and jam because we were in Glasgow. It's, we wanted to try it. So this is not like you have to do this all the time. But I don't have anything I'm trying to fix. Now, let's say lettuce has nothing in it. It's chlorophyll and water. It's not going to hurt you. There's so many plants that will hurt you if you're trying to heal. Why don't you get healed first? Try eliminating a lot of these things. So many people feel better eliminating most of it. And then if you get to where you want to be, I say add a suboptimum food every 4 days and see if it goes on your no list. So you can know, your immune system can tell you, this doesn't work for me right now.
You mentioned this 2-week period to start and then introducing potentially over time. What is included in that initial 2 weeks when the diet's at its most extreme? The 2-week period of total elimination.
Beef, lamb, butter, tallow, decaf.
That's it.
Water.
So no chicken. Like
Sparkling
in that period
water.
of time, what I'm getting at is it to that extreme where we just want to be having ruminant animals? You went over about 5 or 6 things there. Is that it? Or can we have pork during that time, chicken?
No, because the omega-6 content. So if you want to fix your immune system, here's a story from a doctor named Dr. Mackinus, a British doctor. There was this American doctor who put himself through school, Harvard Medical School. His father had an egg farm. So what did he eat? He wasn't a rich guy. Every day he ate eggs. But he also had a runny nose every single day of his life. So couldn't figure it out. Got to be in his 50s, successful doctor. One week he just stops eating eggs. His runny nose went away. Amazing. So he felt great. He'd never figured out why it happened, but he felt great. Then his wife makes him a cake. He doesn't know it has eggs in it. He has a slice of cake and he goes into shock. His immune system had been trying to tell him all his life the eggs are inflammatory, probably the egg white, or the eggs were eating grain, right? So the omega-6 content floored him after he'd removed it for a certain amount of time. That's why those food sensitivity tests don't work, because you have to remove all these things for your immune system to be strong enough to loudly say, I see this as a pathogen.
So when he went into shock, his system was in a position of healing at that point where he was actually weakened before he became strong again?
Yeah.
And how would he have known when he could start introducing eggs?
I don't know. That's all the story goes. It didn't go any longer than that. It was Mackinus' explanation for what he called the Stone Age diet in the 50s.
So let's go over that short list again. Say I'm a new patient working with you. I want to go all out, 2 weeks, total elimination. What can I eat? Lamb.
You can eat any kind of beef. You can eat liver. You can eat short ribs. You can eat, I prefer actually you eat steak, because when you eat ground beef, the protein is slightly altered. So the blade that heats up the meat, when it's being ground, those protein molecules are slightly altered. Now I'm talking about people who are incredibly sensitive. So steak for 2 weeks, lamb, chops, ribeye, whatever kind of steak, doesn't matter as long as it comes from a cow. Doesn't have to be grass-fed. And lots of fat. Doesn't have to be butter. It could be tallow.
Obviously, salt you're a big fan of, so it would be included at that time.
Salt, lots of salt, yeah. And I recommend a half a teaspoon of salt in a glass of water if you've been eating carbs.
Iodine would be included too.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned decaf coffee as part of that short list the first time you went through it. Would you not want to eliminate that early on to eliminate that variable?
Some people can. Some people do, actually. Some people don't drink the decaf coffee. I just happen to drink decaf coffee. So it's not a requirement. So many people are going from caffeinated coffee or tea, which is abominable because of the fluoride content. So that's sort of making it easier for them. Some people just heat up the butter in hot water and they love it.
So after the 2 weeks, they've gone on this quote unquote extreme elimination. Has significant healing happened at that point already where they can begin to introduce? I'm just trying to understand the timeline for somebody that's metabolically unhealthy, overweight. It's been 2 weeks, and obviously this is going to be a big shock for a lot of people's system because this is radically different than what they've been eating. But how much healing has happened already at that 2-week mark where they can begin to bring other foods in?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're in America, so I don't think people evolved to eat the quantity and diversity of food that Americans eat, right? So most other societies are not eating the Pringles and all these other things that we've invented. So it's actually not that weird. In the 1940s, the food chart was a heck of a lot of fat, a heck of a lot of meat. It was all even. It was like a pie chart, right? It wasn't this. So it's really only modern society in certain areas, right, that would have a hard time. The healing that happens, the first thing is usually joint pain goes away. Inflammation is reduced. It's an anti-inflammatory diet. I don't think you're going to be you lose some weight, but you're not going to be losing all the weight that you want because there's going to be other components that need to heal that take a lot longer, which is adrenal and thyroid would take a lot longer. But you've removed the inflammation, allowing yourself to a step up on the healing process. And then you'll also be able to know which foods you were eating before very easily and very clearly are inflammatory to you, because not everybody has a problem with egg whites, and not everybody has a problem with egg yolk, and a lot of people don't have a problem with chicken, but they have a problem with chicken skin, strangely enough. So they'll know that.
We're all very different. Bottom line, we need to test and
yeah, exactly. That's
why
we all
have different genetics, different toxicities, different life experiences, and underlying everything we're saying, we're trying to provide a general framework, but obviously everybody needs to incorporate the nuance of their own being.
Right. But we also evolved as human beings to eat a certain way.
Let's take the journey beyond the 2 weeks now. What foods could somebody start to introduce at that point? What would be the first ones that would be less likely to trigger the body in a negative way?
Egg yolk. I always say egg yolk because people miss creamy. So then they get to have their creamy. And then egg white, they try them together. If it works, they can make those, they can make things with egg whites. But they always let me know next time I see them. I ask, did you add that? Did you add that? This worked. This didn't work.
A big topic in the health world these days is these seed oils, vegetable oils.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that's so far removed from what we've been talking about because we're talking about animal fats. I still want you to comment on how you feel about those because, again, we're talking about a specific diet and lifestyle, but people are going to have their own variations that are going to go beyond what we're speaking about, the quote-unquote ideal. And then I want to talk about some of the other oils that are considered healthy, like olive oil, avocado oil, and talk about the continuum for people that are going to include some of these other foods.
All right. Well, I wouldn't include seed oils. So right there, I just say, no, it's very inflammatory and you're damaging your brain. Avocado oil, not a problem, not too bad. Olive oil, not a problem, but you're not going to it's entertainment. You're not going to be making anything for your body. You're not going to be making hormones. You're not going to be you're reducing stress. You're not going to be restoring. If you run a marathon and you need to recover, those oils are not going to bring you back. Animal fat's going to bring you back. Coconut actually has histamines in it. So some people might not react to it very well.
As you mentioned histamines, it gets me thinking about fermented foods.
Again,
not something not directly recommending, but considered a health food by many, and people are going to include that. Talk about from a histamine perspective and beyond, things like kimchi, sauerkraut. How you feel about those?
I think they're horrible. My daughter's eating them right now. My daughter in Glasgow. Hope she doesn't see this. It's popular now. 2 years ago, people were talking about kimchi and kombucha. No, kombucha 10 years ago. Kimchi's always been around because of Korean culture, right? But this whole new thing, I lived the first 5 years, 8 years of 2 years in New York and then in Germany. I lived in Germany until I was 8. Sauerkraut all the time, homemade sauerkraut. It's only considered healthy because we humans, a lot of humans died trying all these plants. You try that. You eat that nut. You eat that root. We figured out that cooking them and fermenting them, beans, if you eat a bean, you're dead, right? Raw beans, it's really bad. You cook them enough, you reduce the impact of the lectins, but they're still not going to be good for you if you have a health issue or if you eat them every day. So fermentation, like sourdough, so tired of sourdough. Sourdough reduces a little bit of the inflammation of the gluten protein in wheat, but not enough to make it a healthy food for somebody who is trying to heal.
So what I hear you saying is you're taking toxic foods, making them less toxic.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be considering them health foods.
Right. It's like smoking half a cigarette instead of a whole one.
How do you feel about fiber? One of those controversial topics. Again, some people say eating a diverse amount of plants. Obviously, this isn't your realm, but I want you to comment and get your thoughts on it. Is the way to go. And we're feeding the gut microbiome, which is in turn going to be providing nutrients and health for our bodies. And then there's the camp that says fiber's BS. And I assume you're in the latter camp, but I'll have you talk about that.
I am, but I'm also in the latter camp because the papers that they came up with their microbiome were basically, analyzing the feces of African teenagers who had a very diverse microbiome. And they said, okay, these people are healthier than we are here in, the States. So let's just say that all these things are necessary. The carnivore microbiome is completely different. It's you have a die-off of all the bacterial species that are having a happy meal with your kale and your kimchi and stuff. They all die. And then you have other bacteria that live and that we actually evolved to have in our guts. So it's not really, and it changes in 2 weeks. It only takes 2 weeks to change your microbiome. And you don't have to be gobbling probiotics and all those things. Think of all the things you don't need if you're eating carnivore. You don't have to be constantly replenishing with, the FOS, oligosaccharides, all these things these creatures supposedly need to be healthy. You think we evolved to require all those supplements? We go with our spear after that animal and, let me take my probiotics and my oligosaccharides.
So basically, eat the proper diet, let the microbiome take care of itself. And it happens as quickly as 2 weeks, which happens to be the elimination period for your protocol.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's come back to olive oil, avocado oil. We brushed over those. They sound like they're in a moderate okay category.
Moderate okay, yeah.
So not providing benefit, but not destroying the health either.
I agree.
So for people using those in moderation within a diet realm that you're talking about today would be okay.
Yeah. They can have it on their lettuce, which is not damaging.
What are some of the other plant foods that are in that okay realm for people that are going to include them? The less damaging to the body if they're going to eat a mixed diet.
Fruit. So plants don't mind if we eat fruit because plants actually diversify by making fruit, and humans eat it or animals eat it. And, we poop over there in the corner and another plant grows from the seeds. So you've heard other people say it, but the stem, the root, the leaves, those are the part of the plant. It doesn't want you to eat those. That's where the anti-nutrients are. So the fruit doesn't have anti-nutrients. It's just a stimulant. It has sugars. So I would say sour fruits. When we were in Glasgow, near my daughter's apartment, there was a community garden and there was a red currant bush, raspberry bush, and my grandson would crease 1.5, would go under and I'd lift the branches up and give him a bunch of red currants. So they're pretty sour. I think those are fine. Then we have to talk about fruits that have been altered by humans. Bananas are very sweet today. Papaya is, incredibly sweet. Mango is incredibly sweet. None of these fruits were originally that sweet. They have been, Del Monte has tinkered with them, and humanity has tinkered with them to make them very sweet. So they have, the issue with them is that you're having sugar. So a few berries, a half of a sour apple is not going to damage you. But if you're eating a papaya and you're bipolar, you might, climb the walls.
While we're talking about blood sugars, it gets me thinking about being on a diet like you're consuming. And it sounds like, given the little bit of laxity within your diet, you're going to have carbs periodically, which is naturally going to provide that insulin spike. Not that fat and protein aren't providing somewhat of a insulin elevation, we'll call it, but it's not going to be the spike like when we have carbohydrates or things like fruit, or you mentioned pastry before. So what I'm getting at here is, would you say there's any advantage for somebody who is nearly flatlining in comparison to a typical standard American diet, the insulin, the blood glucose, any advantage on periodically spiking those when somebody is on a diet like you're on?
If they're flatlining, they have an Addisonian presentation of reactive hypoglycemia. And I would say fat and no sugar, because you have to fix the adrenal function, because that insulin, that powerful insulin spike that comes from that's like, making you or forcing your blood sugar down, is actually an endocrine issue. I don't think there's any benefit. Now, if you're going to run 100 miles, you're definitely going to need some carbs. So, my husband would go out with, do 100-mile bike rides with his buddies. He's 78. He did his last race when he was 75. And all these, Italians are eating these sweet bars, barrette, the sugar things and stuff. And he would have pieces of salami and, obvious things that didn't melt. And I would say that he would probably need some sugar if he did 200K. But, I told him not to race anymore, and he's not allowed to race anymore anyway, because you're not allowed to race after 75. So yes, you would consider it a drug. I don't want my husband pushing his adrenals so much that he would need sugar. Does that make sense? Just like I would probably need a sugar fix if, when I was fighting in Kung Fu, fighting somebody much bigger than me, much better than me, and I'm shaking like this, I would need some sugar for my adrenals to come out of shock. But I don't want to put myself through that in order to need that fix.
Okay. So it's dependent on
stress,
the activities, stresses.
Yeah.
But no specific benefit in just spiking insulin.
No.
For the health of the pancreas.
No, pancreas is just fine. It evolved to not have that stuff.
What are some of the changes you notice when you introduce carbs? Because obviously you're going to be, you touched on this before, leaving ketosis. You're a big proponent of being in ketosis. Acutely and longer term, say a week out, do you notice a difference when you're bumping yourself out of ketosis?
Well, I only do, I even did it once and measured my blood sugar 5 years ago, and I was out of ketosis for 4 hours. So I don't eat carbs enough to not be in ketosis for more than a couple of hours. I mean, that scone, as they say, with jam just blew through my system. I was back in, I didn't measure, but I ate steak that night and had butter, and the next morning I had my butter. And so I didn't really feel any difference. If I did it for 2 weeks, I'm sure I would.
Any difference in the diet and lifestyle if somebody's coming at this primarily from a weight loss perspective?
Weight loss. Okay. So weight gain, excess weight is your body's way of protecting you from stress. We don't hold on to weight. There's no reason to hold on to weight unless you are in a stress state, because you need extra. The fuel that the weight provides is running away from danger fuel. So if you are in a physiological state of inflammation, that's not going to go away unless you fix it. Doesn't matter what you eat.
So portion sizes, none of that's going to change. Movement. Again, coming to that person who comes to see you and has, say, even 100 extra pounds of body fat on them, is the protocol going to be generally the same?
Absolutely. And the protocol will be for their height and not their weight, for their frame.
What are some of the lifestyle factors that you like to include when somebody's coming to see you, along with the diet, to help optimize their health?
Not getting up before 6, because our circadian rhythm, the curve peaks, cortisol and thyroid hormones peak at between 6 and 9. Exercise in the morning. Don't do it at night. Don't do it afternoon. Go to bed between 9 and 10. Don't take your phone to bed. The basic sleep hygiene stuff. I don't wear makeup and I don't dye my hair. I mean, I don't know. It goes on. How sick are you? You know, I've actually had patients that have not gotten 100% better. And I look at them knowing that I've seen them for 2 or 3 months that they dye their hair. And I say, maybe try not to dye your hair. I mean, these are xenoestrogens in hair dye. So we have to try everything.
Well, what are some of those other general things? You mentioned the water filter.
Yeah.
Filtering your air. What other inputs from the environment are you concerned about?
I got my iodine shield. Okay. So I'm not concerned. I'm not very concerned. When I travel, I am more, obviously it's tiring. I take more drops than I usually do. I take 6 drops a day. When I went to Glasgow, I took 12. I caught my grandson's cold. I took 12 for a week. It was gone in 2 days. He gets iodine, and even though he's still nursing, they all take iodine. I think the fact that I go on the water every day is very meditative for me. I've been telling people to avoid intense cardio and do something like Tai Chi for certain people who have, people who come from, they need that bump from the endorphins. So I used to run and fight. I'm not hurting my adrenals because I'm on the water. It's weird. Just paddling on the water. My heart rate is high when I'm on, but I don't seem to have the effect that I have if I go running, I'll have an irregular heartbeat. So it's weird, but I recommend things that you can do. I think weight training is great. Walking is great. Riding your bike around the neighborhood is great. Being outside is great. I don't think you have to get up at dawn and put your feet in the grass, but
for somebody that's not getting outside, or they're in an environment where they're not getting enough sun, is vitamin D something you like to test?
No, Inuits don't have any vitamin D issues. It's the fat they eat that gives them the vitamin D and adequate thyroid function, because you need thyroid hormone to metabolize the vitamin D from the fat.
Okay. So if somebody is eating enough fat, getting the iodine, their vitamin D levels will regulate, even if they're not getting a lot of sun.
Yeah. The sun has nothing to do with it. They invented that when they took away our cholesterol. Nobody talked about this until they took our cholesterol. Nobody talked about the sun and vitamin D until they took away our cholesterol.
What types of fats specifically are good for vitamin D? Is it just eating fatty ruminant animals? I know cod liver oil specifically is supposedly good for, I believe, vitamin D, vitamin A. Can it be any animal fat, or are there certain ones that you like to include for that specific nutrient?
The animals they're eating, the beef, the lamb, I would say the chicken, the pork. It doesn't have to be fancy or expensive or difficult to get to. It doesn't have, same with the omegas. You don't have to take some weird lobster species and to make sure you're getting that EPA and DHA. It's in the food you're eating in adequate quantities in plain old beef fat.
Okay, important we highlight this. So you're saying If somebody doesn't have access or is opposed to eating fish and seafood, the amount of omega-3 they'll get from ruminant animals will be enough to thrive. And to caveat that, does it have to be a grass-fed ruminant animal?
Doesn't have to be grass-fed. They have to have good thyroid function. So if they are hypothyroid, subclinically hypothyroid, undiagnosed, they will have an issue making vitamin D.
How do you feel about testing? Whether it be vitamin D, hormone tests like the Dutch test.
I don't like the Dutch test.
Thyroid testing.
Thyroid testing, absolutely. I don't like the Dutch test. I like salivary cortisol test if you're testing your stress level, your cortisol levels. Salivary. All steroid hormones should be tested with saliva, not urine.
For somebody right now that's relying on conventional thyroid blood testing to determine thyroid health, any value to that?
Well, I would say value is in free T3, free T4, and both antibodies, not in total T3, not in total T4. And TSH is a pituitary hormone. It's not a thyroid hormone. So you're not measuring what your thyroid is able to do if you measure TSH, which is unfortunately what medicine has decided since, I don't know, the 70s, that it should be the only biomarker.
Somebody coming to see you wanting to know hormonally where they're at on a grand scale, what testing would you do?
Thyroid.
Just thyroid?
And cortisol. Yeah, because thyroid hormone determines, if you look at the steroid hormone cascade, every single synthesis from progesterone to the next hormone, right? Or from testosterone to estrogen, that regulatory mechanism is T3. So how much estrogen you have are making and testosterone you're making, you have to be eating fat and you have to have adequate thyroid hormone, because thyroid hormone decides how much gets made.
Okay, so thyroid, cortisol, and cortisol is tested through the saliva?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the biggest things that are causing our cortisol to be out of control? We've talked about exercise, obviously overdoing
exercise, yeah.
You're drinking decaf coffee. Obviously, if we're overdoing the caffeine, I would assume that would be one of the big
definitely any stimulant.
Okay. Carbohydrates, I believe you would include in that category.
Mm-hmm.
What other ones? What are people doing, and maybe not even knowing it, that's overstimulating their cortisol?
Anything inflammatory. So if they're reacting to a food, like the guy with the eggs, he was damaging his cortisol. Asthma is actually low cortisol. PTSD is low cortisol. So that's the end. If you're hypothyroid, you're going to have high cortisol, which will eventually lead to low cortisol, because your body will not allow you to be in a constant high cortisol state. So you can be hypothyroid and not know it and have high cortisol. But low cortisol feels a heck worse than high cortisol.
And I know you're against fasting in a general sense, at least.
Fasting, yes, thank you.
Is that
fasting,
fit in this category as well?
Ice baths, saunas, anything extreme. Extremes.
But what about for somebody who has regained their health? Could there be hormetic benefits if they're in a good place?
No, because we did not evolve to have a tiger jump in the door and say, "Hey, I'm back," to scare you because you're all better. I don't think it's ever good. We have the capacity to survive war and famine. We have the capacity to, the old story that I always use is, lift the car off our daughter's leg. We have that capacity to get those cortisol reserves up so we can do something, what athletes do, superhuman. But if you stay in that state and you repeat that state over and over again, you are damaging your brain. You'll just turn off. Your brain will turn it off. The pituitary gland will say, no, this constant state is inflammatory. We know that constant injections of cortisone burn brain neurons, and turn your bones into powder. You're doing the exact same thing as having a cortisone shot with your gummy bears, your marijuana gummy bears, your marathons, your saunas, and all that extremes.
You mentioned marathon there. What about short bursts like sprinting or doing sprints on a bike? Because before, I know you're a fan of the paddle boarding. You mentioned walking. Do you think exercise, acutely all-out bursts, would be hormonally detrimental? Or could that be looked at in that short term as being overall beneficial?
Well, we know that 10 minutes of intense exercise raises cortisol levels. So if you're going to do 10 minutes rest, 10 minutes rest, 10 minutes rest, and you do that several times, I think you're going to end up turning it into high intensity interval training, right? So I don't recommend that. Now, I know that I'm not going to sprint on that paddleboard. I'm happy with I purposely chose, there's a team here. I could have been on a team. I would have, they're like, oh, there'll be nobody in your age group. You'll win. Like, no way. I know that I won't sleep well the night before. If I do anything like that, I have had an issue with my adrenals in the past. I'm going to feel horrible.
Diet aside, what would you do if you were in a position where you did push the cortisol acutely and you needed to up, for lack of a better word, the self-care? What would you do for, a day or two to re-regulate yourself?
I would stay home from school and eat a lot of fat. I would recover. I would convalesce. That's what we used to do when we were sick. You stop. You don't go. You have to recover. And we know from the athletes, the paper of the, athletes eating a high-fat diet, elite athletes eating a high-fat diet recovered faster than elite athletes eating a carbohydrate diet.
So basically with the high fat, you're providing the body with whatever substrates it needs to re-regulate hormonally?
You're restoring. Its cortisol is made out of cholesterol. So you're restoring it, and it's anti-inflammatory. So you're dialing down the inflammation that you have caused by going to extremes.
Let's talk more about the fasting piece. For somebody that we could bring our weight loss piece back in, wants to use that as a tool acutely, I'm assuming your answer would be no, but for weight loss, narrowing that eating window, is there any gray area here where we're not narrowing it too much, or we're doing it for a certain period of time to use it as a weight loss tool? Basically, I want to get into the specifics of why you're against fasting and if there's any gray there.
There's no gray. I'm against fasting because you're putting yourself in a stress state. So intermittent fasting, if you have a little bit of fat for breakfast, that's fine. I mean, you don't have to have 2 eggs and 3 pieces of bacon. It doesn't have to be 3 meals a day, but you have to have fat in the morning because that's when your cortisol is peaking. What are you going to make it out of? Your liver made sugar during the night so you could stay asleep, but then you're going to need some fat in the morning so you can wake up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and go about your day. Fasting, if you're talking about carbs, yeah, don't eat the carbs. I mean, medically, not eating carbs used to be considered fasting. Water fasting, not eating anything, I think you could maybe, people were talking about fat fasting last year. I mean, you could do it for a day or two, but I don't think it'd be a good idea to do it for more than that. And I don't think you'd lose much weight. What makes you lose weight is getting you out of a stress state, not shocking yourself with what this thing's called, cow prods, shocking yourself, tasering yourself every 6 hours to raise your cortisol to make you lose weight. It does not work. There's no science to this.
A piece I'd like to understand better, though, is say you wake up and you have something fatty food-wise. When does the body, I'm picturing somebody who is overweight and on a weight loss journey, if you're putting fat into the system, when is it going to switch from burning that dietary fat to the fat on your body if you're constantly providing more fuel into the body.
Right. So the fat is fuel like protein's fuel, right? It's just that the fat calorically has more per gram than the protein. So usually you're eating less volume of fat than you are protein. So it's not like you will more likely burn your own fat if you're in ketosis. So the fat you eat puts you in ketosis because it's also anti-inflammatory. Being overweight is a state of endocrine imbalance. There's a lot of things to unpack there. It's not calories.
I'm just picturing the body switching from catabolic after a night's sleep to anabolic by providing fuel to the system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the system isn't functioning properly if you don't give it some energy to turn on. And you're not, if your cortisol is supposed to peak in the morning and life is stressful enough. There's no way that you can, maybe if you're a matrix and you're just lying in a bubble, then maybe you collect, your needs would be different. But we have just me looking at my computer there's a lot of dopamine going on. Boom, 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 boom is causing stress to the system.
But couldn't the argument be made that our body, if we are overweight or obese, has enough energy on board for the cortisol to produce more?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to work that way. It hasn't for me. Maybe it does. Maybe it has for some people. I know there's that guy who didn't eat for a year, who was so, but we don't know what his other issues were in the 40s or 50s. But I, in my experience, the people I see, that's not been the case.
The other piece that kind of ties to fasting is the snacking. And you've touched on this before. But this is an area that you see differently than a lot of the other influencers in the space, where a lot of people on the extreme would be saying 1 meal a day is ideal or get it down to 2. Again, that fits in with the fasting conversation, narrowing the eating window. But I know you're also a fan of taking jerky, putting butter on it, and having that as a snack throughout the day.
If you're busy, if you need it.
Talk about the nuance there of what you're trying to do on a physiologic level, providing that fuel constantly or, more frequently than somebody having 2 square meals a day.
I'm balancing blood sugar. So obviously the snacking is part of the first protocol. Usually I recommend it until they don't eat it anymore because I'm balancing blood sugar. If you're ill, if you have inflammation, if you have any kind of imbalance in your body that would cause inflammation, you're going to need to balance the blood sugar, and that will require little bits of fat at the times when people crash. The whole world in different time zones is at the coffee machine or eating a candy bar mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Why is that? That's because they're eating carbohydrates and they're crashing after their breakfast, after their Cheerios, we're trying to get people on with rock solid blood sugar so they don't need the snacks. So they don't, if I've got 7 or 8 patients and I went paddleboarding, I'm probably going to have to run in the kitchen and get a snack because my brain is on fire when I'm working. So I'm restoring the energy that I'm using. I'm sitting on my butt, but I'm using energy. So it's not that everybody has to have these fat snacks. It's if they're inflamed and ill and we need to balance their blood sugar.
All right. So we know how you feel about carbs. We know how you feel about fat. What about protein? In your diet and the way you consume the food you do throughout the day, is that something that you prioritize? Is it something that just takes care of itself, eating the way you do? How do you look at that?
It takes care of itself, eating the way I do. I want people to get to the point where they feel they just eat what they need, providing it's high-fat carnivore and it's not Hostess Twinkies. What they need, the macronutrient quantity changes every minute. If I go for a walk with my husband, it's a lot less stressful than I went paddleboarding and saw eight patients, right? Unless we're arguing. It's just a lot less going on in my metabolism. So I might want less fat that day and want more protein. I mean, I tell people who want to go back to the gym that they should go down to, usually I recommend 80-20 for a certain amount of time. And then they might need more protein, 75-25, 70-30. I wouldn't go lower than 70-30 though for women.
For somebody going to the gym, prioritizing resistance training, how does that impact cortisol? Is that something that somebody needs to rebalance out their hormones before getting into? How much is too much if somebody is doing resistance training? I just want to fit that into the cortisol piece, right, and stress, right, and how somebody like you factors that in.
Well, I tell them not to do it too intensely. So weight training is fine to start. They don't have to stop walking. They don't have to stop weight training. But there are certain types of weight training. There's you hold it up for 45 seconds, and then it'll slow. Now, it depends on how intensely you're doing this. If you see that your heart rate is increased a lot by the way you're doing it, then I don't think it'd be a good idea. But just regular old lift the weight and put it down is not going to impact your cortisol. There are ways to turn everything into calorie burning, right? Anything into calorie burning. You can turn Yang style Tai Chi into calorie burning if you're, I'm using the word that they use, right? Physical trainers, personal trainers. You can intensify the way you make the position, intense your muscles to the point where you're going to activate cortisol.
Given the go pace of the modern world over here in the West, at least.
I'm in the West. I'm in the West.
For all of us in the West, how do we factor stress, acute stress, chronic stress, anxiety, whatever we want to call it, mental stress? How does that factor in when you're working with people?
Well, I think everywhere is stress right now. East, West, everywhere there's stress, right? So I factor it in by giving them all the same protocol of food, because the stress will be mitigated by the diet and having your endocrine system balanced.
So you come at it from a food perspective first, rather than, say, a therapy or breathing, breath work.
Yes.
Meditation. We could go on, different modalities that are more focused on the mind.
I think that you can go, as a person who taught Tai Chi and meditation, we need to get from the sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic. And also, as an osteopath, there are things I can do with my hands to inhibit the sympathetic nervous system so that you are more parasympathetic. So you go from fight or flight to rest and digest. But the food part is the first part, because there's so many ways that eating a high fat and nutrient dense diet that you can already reduce the stress, that then you can actually concentrate on the breathing and the meditation. If you're fasting and you're trying to meditate, good luck.
Would it be fair to say that your overarching message then is to get more from sympathetic to parasympathetic? That's going to impact the hormones. And the primary tool that you like to at least start with people on is diet, to start, moving the ball.
Yes, that would be fair to say.
Any last thoughts before we part ways, Elizabeth?
No, thank you. A lot of good questions, Jesse.
We're going to link up your website, your social media, everything in the show notes.
Okay.
Really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Really appreciate all you have to share. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
And so that's why most people wind up on a proper human diet spectrum, which is anywhere from 100 total grams of carbs a day. For some people, that'll reverse their type 2 diabetes. Some people have to go to